Welcome to DLS's Student Learning Series. In this webinar, we'll discuss how to measure progress in language learning. In this webinar, we'll look at three things. First, we'll talk about why it's important to measure progress and the benefits that this can have on your language learning journey. Second, we'll look at how to measure progress and identify some tools and strategies that you can use. And then third, we'll take a look at the DLS formative testing modules, which are now available in your LMS. Then we'll talk about how to get the most out of those. Let's start by taking a look at why measuring progress is important and have a look at what the research has to say. So, why measure progress? Well, as you know, if you've studied a language, learning a language is a long-term undertaking. And as with any long-term undertaking, like running a marathon or anything like that, maintaining motivation is key. And there are lots of studies that have been done that highlight how important it is to both to generate motivation and to keep it up, to maintain it. And seeing where you are on the proficiency continuum of learning a language helps you become a more self-directed learner. And there are a lot of characteristics of a self-directed learner, but two important ones are learners who can set effective, achievable goals and then can recognize progress towards those goals. When we define what it means to measure progress, we see that measuring progress fits into a system of setting goals and then reflecting on performance. So it's kind of this three-part system, and that's how we measure our progress. And multiple studies have shown that setting goals is directly linked to stronger performance and higher achievement. Now that we've seen some of the benefits of measuring progress, let's talk a little bit about the how of measuring progress. So, as we've said earlier, measuring progress starts with setting goals. And when it comes to language learning, not all goals are created equal. So, in order for goal setting to have that really positive effect on achievement and performance that we saw in those research studies, goals have to be effective and realistic. So let's take a look at what that means. When it comes to a language first, it's important to set both short-term goals and long-term goals. And if you have a long-term goal, it should be broken down into achievable sub-goals. It's also important that your goals should be connected to the ILR level descriptors, because if you're working towards something like an OPI, this is how you'll be evaluated. And then the key, the crux of this really, of setting effective goals, is to set SMART goals. You're probably familiar with this acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So you should set goals that you can measure, that are relevant to you, and something that you can put a deadline on. So you can say, I'll learn this, or I'll be able to do this by next week, or next month, or in 6 weeks. So let's look at an example of a SMART goal. And let's say this is for a learner who's at ILR level 2. So here we might see a goal that is very general, very broad. I want to get better at speaking. But even though this is good to know, it's not really going to be helpful in terms of measuring progress because it's so general. Now, here we can see a goal that's coming from the ILR level descriptors for level 2. I can narrate in the past, present, and future. So this could be connected to speaking, of course, and it is more specific, but this would really be better as a long-term goal. So something that you will work towards over time. but it doesn't really fit our criteria of being specific or measurable. Now, here we can see some goals that are much more specific, measurable, and that can be time bound, that we could put a deadline on. So, for example, I can describe an upcoming political or social event in the target region. So, of course, this is working towards the goal of narrating in the future, but we can see that it's much more specific, and so it's going to be easier to measure. Here's another goal that is connected to narration in the future. I can make a presentation describing an upcoming family event. So again, this goal is very specific and very measurable. You can measure whether or not you achieve it or how well you can achieve this goal. And then finally, I can talk about my plans for an upcoming holiday. Again, this is working towards the long-term goal of narration in the future. So these goals are coming from the DLS can-do statements. And if you're not familiar with the DLS can-do statements, you should definitely check them out. They are available in your LMS in the Student Learning Series, and they're based on the ILR level descriptors and the actful can-do statements. So here's an example for ILR 1 for speaking, and you can see here that we start with the long-term goal, and that comes from the ILR level descriptors. And then you can see goals for low. You can't see it here, but there are also goals for mid and high. And then here you can see the can-do statements. And these give you really specific, very measurable goals. And these are great to use for personal goal setting so that you can then measure your progress towards those goals. So this is the start. This is the foundation. And as we said, this is available in your LMS, so you can go and check these out. They're available for speaking, listening, and for reading. Once you've set realistic goals that are relevant to you, the next step in measuring progress is to reflect and evaluate on your performance and on your movement towards those goals. So let's start with evaluation. So self-evaluation, assessing your performance, and this can look like a lot of things. So let's say you measure your progress towards one of those goals. You can think about what you did well and try to be specific here. Maybe thinking about vocabulary that you used, or you added extra details, or you were able to talk without a lot of pauses. You were able to be a fluent speaker. And then identify one or two things that you could improve on. Maybe you noticed that you couldn't talk very accurately when you were speaking in the future tense, so you know that you need to review your future verb forms, for example. And then another helpful question to ask yourself when reflecting on your performance, when evaluating your performance, is to ask yourself what was easy and what was difficult. And this can be helpful in pointing you towards what you need to work on. Another important step of reflection is identifying strategies that work and strategies that work for you. So here, you might reflect on your performance towards these goals, and you might try to identify strategies that worked for you. So thinking about what helped you do well in this performance and trying to identify study habits or practice activities or exercises that you did that were helpful for you. And as you set your next goals, starting to think about what strategies you can use that will help you work towards that goal. So it might be practicing with your teacher, maybe working on a specific grammar structure or vocabulary set, or it might be maybe watching a native speaker do a similar task. It might be practicing different answers to the question that you want to give an answer to. So identifying the strategies that have worked for you and trying to build up a repertoire of strategies that you know are helpful to you are really crucial here. Now, let's take a look at DLS Formative Assessment modules. DLS Formative Assessment modules are currently available in your LMS. You'll see them as a separate tile that you can click on within your LMS class. So here are the formative assessment modules, and these are available now in your LMS. So here you can see a brief overview and some general instructions. And then if you scroll down, you'll see that the formative assessment modules are organized by level. So these are the level 1 modules, and you can see the topics here, the forte topics. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the level 2 modules, and these are based on the flow topics. And then level 3 is just below this. So once you find your level, you can then choose a topic and a task that you want to self-assess on, or you want to assess on. So you choose your task, and it takes you to a separate page here. And then I always click open in a new tab, just because it's a bit easier if you have the whole screen to work with. And just a note here that in order to use the modules, you need to be using Google Chrome as your web browser. So if you're using another web browser, you're likely going to run into some glitches. So this is the title page, and you can navigate here by going to the lower right-hand corner, going to the next slide. And then here's your speaking task. You can see the instructions and a time limit here. And you might take a moment to prepare here, or you might choose to just kind of jump in spontaneously. Whichever you choose, when you're ready to record, just click here, and then you can see your options for recording. So this is the one you're most likely going to use, record an audio comment. But you can also choose to record a video comment if you want to use your webcam here. Or maybe if your internet connection is not fantastic, you might record on your phone and then upload the comment. This is for dial-in. You're probably not going to use that. Once you've recorded your comment, go ahead and click to the next slide. And then here you have the reflection slide. So this is going to ask you to reflect on your speaking sample, thinking about what was easy, difficult, etc. And so here you're going to again record your reflection. You can use any of the options here, or if you want to type a comment, you have that option as well. The next slide gives you some base ILR level descriptors. So you can just take a moment to refresh your knowledge here and read through these. And then the final slide is asking you to assess your speaking sample according to the ILR descriptors on the previous slide. And then identify kind of 2 strategies or 2 things that you can work on in order to get to the next level. And then again, you can record a comment here using any of these options, and then you're done. That's it. And just a quick note that the formative assessment modules must be used on Google Chrome. They use VoiceThread, and if it's not used on Chrome, then another browser will cause glitches. So just make sure you're on Chrome when you click to do a formative assessment module. So that gives you an idea of what the formative assessment modules look like. And in your LMS, you'll be able to choose a task that works for you. So it might be something that you've recently covered in class, or something that you feel like would be a good goal for you to work towards. And then a slide for reflection asks you to evaluate your performance and identify specific areas for you to work on. And remember that if you are working in a current class right now, you can always talk with your instructor and ask your instructor to evaluate your performance as well. It's always a good idea to do your self-evaluation before getting your instructor's evaluation, and then you can compare notes. So we want to wrap up just by a quick review of the benefits of measuring progress here, which include increased and maintained motivation throughout the language learning journey, improved language ability and achievement, improved ability to self-assess, so the more you do it, the better you get at self-assessment, and then decreased language-related anxiety. So lots of reasons to undertake measuring your progress, setting specific, achievable goals, performing towards those goals, and then reflecting and evaluating your progress. We hope you try out one of our formative assessment modules and let us know how it works for you. Thank you so much. Many of the materials that we used to create this webinar are available online, and it can be really helpful to peruse these sources at your leisure in order to help you get a better understanding of the linguistic functions and what's expected at each level. So here are the references we used. Feel free to check them out as you have time.